So in conjunction with, desperate and very dedicated alcoholism and drug addiction was a near terminal depression that was constantly, swirling above me, storm clouds and thunder and lightning. And it was awful, man. I look back on it now and wonder how I got through it without, ending my life or losing my life.
Hello, my friend, and welcome to another episode of I Love Being Sober, sponsored by Camelback Recovery, Arizona's preferred mental health and addiction treatment option to help newcomers on their path to recovery. If that's you or someone you know, then you're in the right place. Because my name is Tim Westbrook, and I'm the CEO and founder of Camelback Recovery, here in the always sunny and always sober Phoenix, Arizona, where my team and I, over the course of many years, have helped thousands of people to stop their suffering and continue on their path to recovery. Today, I'm honored to have a truly remarkable guest, Zach Skow, whose life story and work exemplify the transformative power of sobriety and compassion. Zach is not just a survivor, he's a beacon of hope and change. As the founder of Marley's Mutts Dog Rescue and the visionary behind the Pawsitive Change Program, Zach has harnessed his passion for animals to foster healing and redemption. His innovative approach brings together rescue dogs and inmates, creating life-changing bonds and promoting mutual healing and growth. But Zach's journey is also deeply personal. As a sober man, he embodies the resilience and commitment we celebrate on this podcast. His experiences, struggles, and victories in maintaining sobriety offer profound insights and inspiration for us all. Today, we'll dive into Zach's journey, exploring how sobriety has fueled his mission and how the unconditional love of dogs can lead to a profound personal transformation. Zach, welcome to I Love Being Sober. I'm thrilled to share your story and learn from your experiences.
Yeah, buddy. Let's rock and roll, man. Thanks for making the time. Thanks for dealing with all our technical issues. I think we can blame most of it on the dogs, specifically just puppies.
Definitely.
They are always messing up. They're always a pain in the ass. And
Definitely
so we're going to make
dog's fault. I've got Wayne and Betty. Wayne and Betty, I had to put them away because they, same thing. They were causing problems.
We're just going to blame it all on Molokai.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Zach, can you share with us what your life was like before you decided to become sober?
Oh, my goodness gracious. So life prior to getting sober was fully and completely dedicated to alcoholism and drug addiction. Most of the hours of every day were spent trying to solidify that I had enough alcohol or drugs to get through the day. You know what I mean? So a big part of, in the end, I was drinking a box of wine a day, which it was only $7.99. I only had to come up with $8 to meet my daily alcohol fix. But yeah, it was, I was drinking whatever that is, 5 liters of wine a day, just 9 bottles. I don't know what that amounts to.
Classy.
And, oh yeah, classy. Right. It was awful, man. I was constantly chasing my tail, always trying to make sure that I had alcohol and drugs. Really had probably alienated most of my friends, most of my family. And by that point, I was very preoccupied with self-hatred. I think that's where I spent most of my mental hours was in this solitude of self-hatred and, self-assassination. I spent an incomprehensible amount of time just going over things in my life that I'd done, replaying scenarios, kind of having this post-traumatic stress like meltdown where I would get stuck in certain loops of remembrance, loops of behavior, and it was awful, man. It was something that I'm actually kind of glad you asked me that question. I haven't reflected on what it was like up, in the end for me in a very long time. But it was awful, man. It was drinking 24 hours a day. I drank 24 hours a day. I drank all night long. I tried to I would always sedate myself to sleep. So I would drink as much as humanly possible, usually take some various forms of sleeping pills or sedatives to try to go to sleep. And then I'd wake up an hour, maybe two later, and I would drink a solo cup full of wine or drink a whatever mixed cocktail I could to try to go back to sleep. Then I'd wake up again, do the same thing, wake up again, do the same thing. Hop in the shower in the morning when I woke up, always have a drink in the shower. Yeah, it was a nightmare, man. It was an absolute mess of a nightmare.
Wow.
And yeah, all of this within the context of needing to be able to drink. Like, all of my heroes, those within my family that I idolized, that I worshipped, that I put on a pedestal, they all drank and drank to excess. So, I was in this constant struggle to try to figure out how to get away with drinking 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, get away with drugging usually several days a week, and still like maintain some sort of viable life, which for the last few years, I didn't really have any sort of viable life. It was such a mess, such a nightmare. God, there was a call coming in, I had to mute. But yeah, so in conjunction with, desperate and very dedicated alcoholism and drug addiction was a near terminal depression that was constantly, swirling above me, storm clouds and thunder and lightning. And it was awful, man. I look back on it now and wonder how I got through it without, ending my life or losing my life.
What moment or event would you describe as your rock bottom that propelled you toward choosing sobriety?
This is a tough one. All right. So I would say the moment that propelled me into sobriety was a few weeks after I'd gotten out. So I have to back up a little bit. The moment that propelled me into sobriety was a couple of weeks after I got out of the hospital. I had been acutely ill in liver failure in the hospital for 6 weeks. I got admitted to the comprehensive transplant program at Cedars-Sinai to try to get me a liver transplant. And I was sent home to save my life. I was extremely suicidal when I got home. I'd never been without alcohol or drugs my whole life. I'd become addicted to drugs in the hospital. I was addicted to Dilaudid and morphine. And I had lost all control of everything. Physically, I was like the sickest sick person you can imagine. I had this huge 9 months pregnant belly. I had a catheter in my back that they used to drain, it's called paracentesis, to drain this huge mass of blood and bile that I had in my stomach. I had ammonia buildup on my brain, so I wasn't cognitively always aware. I had a really hard time understanding sometimes where I was, who I was, what day it was, what stage of my life I was. So ammonia really complicates your mental acuity. And at that point, I didn't know how to put one foot in front of the other whatsoever. I didn't know how to cope with life. I didn't know how to deal with what was coming at my spirit, at my mind, at my heart. I couldn't fend off all the realities of life. And I'd never been without drugs or alcohol. So all of these realities are sinking in on me, including the fact that I'm dying. And I couldn't get away from this fact that I was dying. They told me I had less than 90 days to live. They told me I needed a liver transplant to survive. And I'm trying to cope with the reality of death and my own mortality while being just like scared to death, like a child. I mean, you're really reduced to this childlike fear of everything. And the way it sort of manifested was when you're that sick and you're sort of cartwheeling out of control towards your own death. Sometimes the only thing you can control is your death, So I became obsessed with suicidal thoughts and ideations and how I was going to take my own life,
Yeah.
Because when you're that sick, there's nothing you can control. I can't make myself sober. I can't make my liver get better. I can't make my pancreas get better. I'm just coasting towards this inevitability of death. And so what does it all mean? What does it all matter? I might as well just, take my life and control something that, grab a hold of something that I can actually control. And so I really struggled with that idea, and I'd spent a lot of time with my dad's handgun, just, sitting there racking it, looking at it, messing with, putting bullets in and out. And I started to find some purpose in suicide. And as weird as it sounds, like when you actually find something you can control and like even potentially have one last final, what you view as altruistic maneuver, which is to take yourself out of the equation for the betterment of your family and friends, you really become polluted with that idea. So my mind was just polluted with suicidal thoughts, because that was going to be the one thing I would do for my friends and family, and maybe even for myself, you know, to eliminate the suffering. But one night, when you're in liver failure, you have a really hard time with just about everything. And I would soil the bed at night. I couldn't control my bowels. And so I had soiled the bed. It was in the middle of the night. And I walked by the mirror. I took my clothes off, which was hard to do. And I walked by the mirror in the downstairs bathroom. And it's a full length mirror. I caught a full glimpse of myself, and I'm staring at this person in the mirror that I fundamentally do not recognize. And, I kind of like lean into the mirror, and I'm looking at this just completely yellow human being. I had orange, yellow face, skin. Everything was bruised and purple. My eyes were sunk back in my head. My face was like gray. And I had poop all over me. I had this massive belly, like 9 months pregnant with varicose veins. My belly button was herniated. I had this huge hole in my back that they used to drain me. It was, and I was looking at myself, and I just couldn't believe who I was looking at. And I didn't recognize myself. I didn't recognize anything about myself, including my own eyes. And when you have that moment where you don't recognize your own glance, like your own stare, your own window into your soul, that you've like lost yourself completely. It was a very scary, moment where it was kind of like pushing me over the edge into suicide. And so I just started to, cry real, real badly and sort of weep, partially out of just feeling sorry for myself, because I had such a hard time cleaning myself up when I would soil the bed. And I looked down at my dogs, and, I'm going through this like existential crisis in the mirror. And I look down at my dogs, and they're all lined up on the wall next to the toilet, Marley, Tug, and Buddy. And they're all looking up at me. Again, it's 3:00 in the morning. I've pooped myself. I want to commit suicide that second. I look down at my dogs, and they all are looking up at me like it's a completely normal day. Like everything is fine. Like they recognize that I am there, that I'm okay, that I'm gonna be okay, that they're excited with my presence, that they're just happy I made eye contact with them.
Right.
And they're just wiggling at me with this body language of, God damn it, Dad, we love you so much. Like, we just love you so much. And we know you're making your way over to the toilet here. So we're sitting at the toilet waiting for you. And whatever you got to go through, if you have to throw up, if you have to lose your bowels, whatever you need to do, we'll be right here. Short of, licking it off of you, we're here to support you in any way we can. And I looked at those dogs, man, and the way they looked at me was just that they saw who I was, that they recognized that I was still there, and that they recognized I was still inside of me. And I didn't recognize that I was still there. I had a really hard time wondering if I was still in my own soul, if my soul was still there, if I was still, my spirit was still intact. You go through that kind of an experience, and you're that addicted to drugs and alcohol, you can't help but wonder if you're permanently broken, if you're never coming back. And I felt like I was not coming back. And I felt like that was signified in that exchange with myself. When you can't recognize who's looking back at you in the mirror, it is such a terrifying experience, because you go, oh my God, I'm gone. Like I'm gone. I'm gone, and I'm not coming back. And if I'm gone and not coming back, I might as well just check out right now, because there's no point to any of this. And the dogs just showed me that there was a point, that I was still in there, and that they could see my soul, that they could recognize my spirit, and that they loved everything about me. And I knew I was a good person, man. I knew I had sound morals. I knew that I could make other people happy. I knew that was a trait that I've always had, that I could inspire, that I could make people laugh. I could make them feel loved. And it just reminded me that I can make people feel loved and help. And that was on, written on the faces and in the body language of all three of my dogs. And so, made my way over to the toilet, did what I had to do. And then we didn't go back to sleep that night. I stayed up with my dogs, and I journaled, and we watched the sunrise, and I still have that journal. I took a picture of the sunrise, and that day I just committed myself and said, this is the first day of the rest of my life, and we're going to do this together. And I don't have the first idea of how we're going to do it, but we're going to try. And we did. I couldn't walk at that time. I couldn't, but make it down the driveway and then back up. But that was the first day of many aspects of the rest of my life, because we started everything in my life from that point on went to the dogs. From that moment on, every day from that point on was dedicated to animal welfare and trying to save dogs.
Wow.
Yeah. And then obviously with that, I'm sure you're going to get to this, comes this profound purpose outside of yourself, and what I needed was, I was an egomaniac with an inferiority complex, right? Like all I thought was negatively of myself. I viewed myself as a piece of shit, and that's all that I thought about. You know what I mean? Just full on, like sympathetic narcissist. I just wanted the world to feel sorry for me,
right?
Because that was how I'd always gotten things in life. And finding the purpose in those animals, and then working to build Marley's Mutts, and starting that very slow process, it changed. I think that was the key to unlock my sobriety, and to even give me a chance at sobriety, was having a purpose outside of myself.
Right. I guess that does lead me to my next question. What were the main factors or motivations that drove you to embrace sobriety and your new way of life?
Yeah, so there's a lot of things. First off, I needed 6 months sober to get a liver transplant. I had less than 90 days to live, but if I could survive 90 days and I could get 6 months of sobriety, I would get my liver transplant. So everything hinged on trying to survive 6 months. And in order to do that, I had to try to walk. I had to change everything about my diet, and I had to find the will to live. And those dogs led me into a profound connection with self, with a power greater than myself. And a lot of that was just on these walks in the morning with the sunrise. When you're walking with 3 dogs in the mountains, watching the sunrise, listening to what's happening around you, there is a divinity and a concept, and you're surrounded by something greater than yourself, and you'd have to be emotionally completely disconnected not to feel some of that. And then sorry, ask the question one more time.
What were the main factors or motivations that drove you to embrace sobriety and your new way of life?
Yeah, so the obvious factor that introduced me to sobriety was needing sobriety to get my liver transplant.
Right.
I needed 6 months to survive, and without that, I wasn't going to get my liver transplant. Mm-hmm. But what really got me into sobriety were 2 things. We're working with the dogs when you're rehabilitating and training dogs. When your energy is elsewhere, when your mind, spirit is elsewhere, when you are plugged into anxiety, nervousness, all kinds of different elements of life, and you can't be present, you are fundamentally ineffective. And the leash is an umbilical cord that's channeling energy from you into those dogs. And it requires you to be present. It requires you to understand what you're experiencing. And that was really hard for me, to have to feel all of what I was experiencing, because in order to serve these dogs, I had to feel it. I had to process what I was feeling, and I had no outlet to figure that out. So working in a 12-step program, being part of sobriety groups, gave me the tools that I needed, to pursue sobriety in the first place. So without, and it's very important for me to state that without, the program of recovery, there would be absolutely I would not have had a chance in hell of recovery. Left to my own devices, I wouldn't have made it a week. But because I had to be going to meetings to prove to Cedars-Sinai Comprehensive Transplant Program that I was sober, so I had to go to meetings. I had to fax them. A lot of people go to meetings on court cards. I was there on a liver card, the liver transplant card. And I had to fax them every night to prove I was going to those meetings. And that made all the difference in the world, because I found community, and I found camaraderie, and I found a place where I felt comfortable being myself. Right. And I didn't feel comfortable being myself anywhere, nowhere,
Right. You are the average of the 5 people that you spend the most time with. And if you're spending time with people that are in recovery and living a sober life, then it makes it a hell of a lot easier.
Yeah, definitely. It definitely showed me, working a program showed me what was possible. You get to surround yourself with people who have made this a lifestyle. And so while you're living one day at a time, you're also surrounded by examples of how people have done it, years at a time, and done it successfully. And It was remarkable what started to happen, man. I was always afraid that when I started to discover myself emotionally and spiritually, I'd be scared of what I found, you know.
Yeah.
And I started to be impressed with what I found. I started to love myself, you know, with what I found. There's such a you can really expose your own humanity in when you're in recovery, because there are so many opportunities to work with people that have it worse than you, or that have it worse than you in different ways. And so connecting with people, you know, I became the default liver transplant, sick liver, sick kidneys, you know, people who had drank themselves into physical maladies. I became that default you know, counselor
Okay.
who would check in with everybody, because I was still going to transplant, you know, appointments, you know, every 2 weeks. And it was just remarkable. I found, you know, I think a lot of us struggle with drugs and alcohol because of self-esteem. You know, we have self-esteem problems, and when you feel so poorly about yourself, it's virtually impossible to have long-term sobriety. But when you can practice being a person in a safe space like the halls, or, you know, other types of recovery programs, when you get that practice of how to live, God, it just instilled this natural self-esteem in me. You know, I had crippling anxiety when it came to going anywhere, you know, school, the market, drug dealer's house, whatever. I had spectacular anxiety about these things. And probably a couple of months. And also, you have to remember, back then I looked terrible. I mean, I looked so sick that anyone who saw me was like, Jesus Christ, what's wrong with that guy?
Right.
And a lot of people didn't want to even get close to me because they like thought or knew I was going to die. And that was tough for people, you know. And I was 28 at the time. I was young. But even with the way I looked, I started to feel really comfortable out in public. You know, I started to own what I was going through. I started to have, like, you know, confidence in my odd predicament. Like, that was something I felt so much shame about, that I drank and drugged myself into liver failure. You know, there's nothing proud about that. But I started to become proud. I started to become proud of what I was going through. I started to become proud of being, I've never been more proud to be an alcoholic and a drug addict. Like, I am to the moon and back proud of being an addict and an alcoholic, you know. And I'm, once I think I accepted that identity of being a proud alcoholic and addict in recovery, like, everything changed, you know. And it really became an identity that I love to wear and I love to share.
Yeah, you're not alone. And I hear that and I feel the same way. It's like I'm so grateful and proud that I'm in recovery and I live the life that I live today. So that leads to the next question. Looking back, how has your perception of sobriety evolved from the early days of your journey to now?
How has my perception of sobriety changed? Elaborate on what you're.
How did you feel when you first got sober? You felt a certain way about being sober. Maybe
Mhm,
even before you got sober, you felt a certain way about possibly being sober. I mean,
mhm.
like, I don't know about you, but I thought that being sober was a fate worse than death.
Oh yeah,
And then once I got sober, I
right.
was like, wow, this is actually pretty good. And then
Yeah,
even today, it's like I couldn't imagine my life. I couldn't
yeah,
imagine drinking. I couldn't
yeah,
imagine doing drugs. I couldn't
yeah.
imagine living a life like that.
Yeah, there's a famous Bert Kreischer clip on you can see on Instagram, where he basically says, "I will never quit drinking," and then he gives the following reasons about why he's in love with alcohol and why he'll never quit drinking.
Uh-huh.
Um, I had that exact epiphany, that exact moment where I got in a car accident, totaled a car, broke my chest, and I had healed from that, and I was going to try to go one day without drinking, and I couldn't do it. And I went into terrible tremors, vomiting, all kinds. So I was at the liquor store 6 o'clock in the morning that next day and told myself, I'm never, ever going to stop drinking. Like, I
Yeah.
am 1000% committed to this. It is the journey of my life to keep alcohol in my life and help me get through the challenges of existing, because I can't, the only time I can stand being in my own skin is when I'm properly lubricated. The only time I can stand dealing with, you know, people, places, and things is when I'm properly intoxicated. And there is simply no way for me outside in this world without alcohol. I existentially, in order for me to exist, I need alcohol, period.
Mhm.
Period.
Right.
And I say that in as stern of a statement as I can possibly make. There was no me without alcohol. You know, so my concept of sobriety was it wasn't even a concept. I wouldn't entertain it for a minute. Like
Yeah.
I would not entertain sobriety for a second, regardless of the fact that how I was comporting myself in life.
Mhm.
You know, and even when I started going to meetings, I thought most of the people were full of shit. You know, I thought they were lying about their sobriety. I thought, it was very interesting. It was, and I was only there for a liver transplant. They were a means to an end. So my concept of in early recovery for the first several weeks or even months was these folks are going to help me get a liver transplant. So I asked for the president. They're like, we don't have a president. I'm like, well, let me talk to the vice president. They're like, we don't have a vice. They're like, we have a secretary. You want to speak to the secretary?
Right.
I'm like, well, whatever. Let me talk to the secretary. I need my liver transplant, and I'm not going to quit bitching until I get that. And then I slowly started to learn what it was about and got a different concept. And now, I mean, sobriety is the most important thing in my life, hands down, bar none. It's more important than my kids. It's more important than my work. It's more important than, it is the most important thing that exists in my life. And building on that sobriety and trying to integrate different, methods for soulful existence is what I'm constantly striving towards,
How have dogs contributed to your journey of recovery and personal growth?
Oh man, dogs were when it comes to my recovery and getting better from end stage liver failure, dogs were the variable that made the difference, especially in the beginning. One of the things that happens when you're rehabilitating a dog is you need to provide rules, boundaries, discipline, exercise, affection, and love, right? Those are things you need to integrate into a dog's life. And with that structure, discipline, boundaries, love, all those things, you produce an adoptable dog that knows how to connect with its parent and then can be adopted. Likewise, what a person in recovery needs is rules, boundaries, discipline, exercise, affection, and love. So in the process of rehabilitating these dogs, I was rehabilitating myself without really knowing it. And I integrated a strict discipline into my life, which I didn't have discipline for shit except for getting drugs. Like I did not apply discipline for one thing in my life outside of alcohol and drugs. And it changed everything about my life. It gave me discipline. It gave me routine. It gave me structure. It gave me exercise. It gave me a spirituality. It gave me a sense of self-esteem because I was being of service to something greater than myself. It catapulted me into the next chapter of my life. I mean, like, I was a different person, even in a period of like 3 months. You go look at me in September of 2008 when I got out of the hospital to November, December of 2008. And I was a different person. Like I was recovering so quickly physically. I mean, again, I was 140 pounds, completely yellow, covered in bruises with a 9 months pregnant belly. I looked and hugely fat legs and ankles and feet. I had edema and all that. And fast forward a few months, I was radically changing spiritually, in my heart, in my mind, just the possibilities. I was shedding that suicidal like cloak that you feel like almost you have to wear as like a indication of your depression and what you're struggling with. And the dogs took me all the way through that, because every day I had the option of focusing on my own horse shit and getting into some petty mental spiral about God knows what, or plugging myself into the dogs. And those dogs were something I couldn't ignore. There's fucking 7 of them now. And I got to the point where I just kept adding dogs. So I got 10, 11 dogs living at my house. They're not going to stop barking. They're not going to stop. They have to be tended to. So regardless of your feelings or whatever the state you're bringing to the table, they needed to be dealt with. And when I plugged myself into them and to providing that structure and everything that they needed, I gave it to myself. And it was magical. There's no replacement for what those dogs were able to provide for me in the early days of sobriety and how they helped me feel also on top of that unconditionally loved. As a person who has felt conditionally loved my entire life, that people's love for me had to do with my looks or had to do with what I could offer them entree to or this, that, or the other. And to be able to really root down, and I mean cuddle down in with it, like at nighttime where you're going through your pitiful moments and surround yourself with dogs and really feel the love. I think it rewired me, to be perfectly honest.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Marley's Mutts. Can you walk us through the story behind Marley's Mutts and what inspired you to start this organization?
Yeah, so Marley's Mutts was born out of my struggle with liver disease and trying to get my liver transplant. So I never planned on being an animal rescuer. I was always really great with dogs. I always had dogs, always had rescue dogs. But Marley's Mutts was naturally born out of needing to focus on something other than myself. Like I said, I was so focused on being the piece of shit at the center of the universe that I couldn't think past myself and my own emotions and my own spiritual funk. And the minute I plugged into those dogs, everything started to change, and I started to gain radical zest for life. And so you have to keep in mind, in the early days, I was just trying to get 6 months of sobriety.
Right.
So once I got 6 months of sobriety and they told me I no longer needed a liver transplant and that they were just going to keep me coming in every 3 months for checkup, for imaging, and that we're just going to coast and we're going to, keep an eye on this. But for now, you're going to live and you don't need a transplant. Then all of a sudden it's, well, shit, what do we do now? What do we do now? And the local veterinary
Did
hospital, the
you
local,
did you think you were going to go back to drinking after you got the liver transplant?
no, I didn't get a liver transplant.
Oh, you didn't?
Yeah. No. So when I got what I needed was 6 months sober in order to qualify for a liver transplant. Once I got
but
6 months sober, I
did you
didn't need one.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
amazing.
So by the time I got to 6 months, my bilirubin had plummeted, my AST and my ALT. You get what's called a MELD score, model for end stage liver disease score. And
Okay.
based on that score, you're transplant eligible. And you have to have a high score for a certain period of time. That means you're transplant eligible. So by the time I got 6 months sober, I no longer needed a transplant. I'm still a member of the transplant hospital. I will be for the rest of my life. But it was remarkable. It was a huge revelation, and the idea was, okay, well, what do we do now? And I had been working with the dogs for that entire period of time. And my community started to learn about me because I was this yellow guy who was putting up flyers for dogs all over town. And this was right around the launch of Facebook. So we did a lot of our stuff through posters. So my community was really supporting this guy in recovery who's trying to save pit bulls, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, people just pushed me into it. They said, "Hey, we really think you should do this." And I was like, "Do what?" So we really think you should start an animal rescue. I'm like, it's horseshit. The IRS will never let me do that. You can't submit like, "Hey, I'm a drunk with a dream. How about giving me a 501c3?" There's no way that's gonna work. I may have had better self-esteem, but I wasn't self-confident, you
Okay.
know. But we ended up doing it. The veterinary hospital gave me a couple of kennels at their hospital to use to get started. I had some people donate some money, and we were off to the races. And we became a company in April of 2009. So it's our 15-year anniversary right now.
Wow. Okay.
And yeah, and then we just never stopped. It went from social media helped us. I mean, Facebook in particular allowed us to reach a tremendous audience because we're in the sticks. We're up in the mountains. We're in a very small community, 45 minutes east of Bakersfield. Facebook allowed us to reach a foster network, allowed us to start to build that foster network, enrich those relationships, take on a lot more dogs, start doing a whole bunch of different things. And we've just shot to the moon from there. We have a whole bunch of programs. We have 30 employees. We have 100 and something dogs. We've adopted probably 10,000 dogs in the last 15 years. It's been a wild ride. And even just being able to survive 15 years, it's very difficult as an animal rescue to survive for this long and to get through a lot of the perturbations, just the cultural perturbations that have happened, like COVID and various upticks in animal euthanasia. But that's the essence of Marley's Mutts. So now we run a program called Marley's Mutts. Is basically consists of 4 departments. We have the ranch here where I'm coming to you from. We have a 20-acre ranch filled with dogs, wheelie dogs, big dogs, small dogs, all kinds of dogs. Right next door to Tehachapi State Prison, where we operate a Pawsitive Change Program. And Pawsitive Change is an inmate canine training program where we bring in a whole bunch of dogs to live in the state prison system. We do that at 6 different facilities all across California. We also have a Miracle Mutts program, which is our therapy program, which is active basically every day. Go ahead.
Going back to Pawsitive Change, how did the idea for that program come about?
Pawsitive Change came about from a buddy of mine, Robbie, who got out of prison, and we adopted a dog to him that fundamentally changed his life. He was somebody that was sort of destined for recidivism, at least potentially, destined to go back to prison. He had been incarcerated at 17 and spent 13 years in and was just very much sort of ruined by the prison system. And we adopted a dog to him named Shadow, whom I had been fostering, and she changed his entire life. We ended up hiring him. Then he got hired out at Free to Live Animal Sanctuary. He became a shelter manager. And then now he has his own rescue called Strength of Shadow. So it was in that relationship, watching the two of them heal one another. She had been shot in the chest, the dog had. That really gave me the idea. And it took years. We built that for 3 or 4 years before we were able to get into an actual correctional facility. That launched January 2016, Positive Change California City Correctional Facility. And we've been doing it nonstop for 8 years. We're at we have a federal women's program at the Bureau of Prisons. We have 4 men's programs, and we have 2 juvenile programs, both boys and girls, where rescue dogs are living in prison, rehabilitating with the incarcerated. And the goal of that, obviously, is to rehabilitate death row dogs and get them off to adoption to stay adopted. But it's also to reduce recidivism and to create dog trainers from the incarcerated population. So we have about 30 formerly incarcerated students who are involved in the pet industry in some way, shape, or form.
Now, do the dogs stay at the prison with the inmates?
Yeah, they live there.
Wow.
For 3 months. So as soon as we get done, I'll be going next door to Tehachapi. We have a news story happening tonight. So we have 8 dogs living in there, 22 students.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a level 3 maximum security prison. And those dogs live in the pod with our students.
Wow. I mean,
yeah.
Like man's best friend. I mean, that's got to be such a gift.
Oh, you can imagine a lot of these guys haven't seen a dog in decades. And there's something about a dog that represents love, compassion. It represents home. Dogs represent home. Yeah. And so to be able to bring dogs into that place and really give people a shot in the heart, and it's not just that. I mean, it's obviously those little moments, but what's happening with our students is the same thing that happened to me in recovery, right? Positive Change is facilitating rehabilitation, just like what happened with me when I was in liver failure, where these guys, a lot of them have been politicking within prison, kind of focused on the wrong things, and they found the dog program to help bring them into doing their time programming, really enriching themselves, believing in themselves, trying to set their goals high, set their standards high, and truly rehabilitate the human being that they are. And it has facilitated profound changes within our students. And I've seen some really incredible transformations, both canine and human, that are remarkable to behold. There's simply, I'm a very emotional person. I like to experience like the bone marrow of life, like the deepest, gnarly emotions, whether they be good, bad, or, and being in there, feeling the tense, the energy, feeling the darkness, feeling just the shadow that like permeates that whole place, and being able to bring dogs into that place and just feeling the whole, I mean, there's thousands of inmates in there, to feel their whole collective energy like rise up, and to see the vibe change, and to watch the communication between staff and the incarcerated change. And lots of things change when you run a dog program on a maximum security prison yard. There's a lot of hope, there's opportunity, there's belief, there's humanization. There's a lot of things that they deserve to feel, that they deserve to experience, that the dog program initiates, that I just love.
Can you think of a time or a particularly moving success story from the Positive Change Program?
Oh yeah, tons of them. Tons of times. You mean specifically like a dog?
Yeah, give me a specific story that you can think of a success.
Yeah, sure. One in particular, this is back when we didn't have a ranch. We were an all foster organization. And we had cleared the shelter out in Mojave, and they had one dog there named Smokey. Now, on Smokey's kennel card, it said, like, reason for surrender. Like, why was he surrendered to the shelter? And it says, hates people. That's all it said. It's just, this dog fucking hates people.
Uh-huh.
And I'm looking at him at the kennel, and he's got, kind of underbite with his one tooth up, but he's a cattle dog. He's a working dog. Mm-hmm. And he's already bit people, but we ended up taking a chance on him, and we pulled him out of there, and he tried to bite me immediately. And we sent him into prison because I knew that I had one trainer in mind, Jason Morey, who was a standout trainer of ours. Jason, I think, had been incarcerated for 12 years at that point, and we paired him up with Jason. And Jason is very much looked like an inmate, shaved head, tattoos all over his face and head, whole body, but one of the most in tune, respectful, dynamic, empathetic, loving, conscientious people thoughtful in his own thoughts and thoughtful in how he spoke to people. Jason was just, he's a specimen of a human being. He's not very tall, he's short, but I mean, he's a specimen. You feel his energy. And so we paired Smokey up with Jason, and it was just a match made in heaven. It took a while before any of the other students could touch him. You know, Jason had to really create a tight structure around Smokey so that very few people interacted with him, because if they bite in prison, we have to pull them. So
Yeah,
it's very important that he not get pulled. And Smokey had no hope, man. I mean, this was a dog that probably needed to be euthanized.
right.
And not
He
only
hated
did
people.
yeah, he hated people. Yeah, not only did Smokey not hate people, he was just a fundamentally misunderstood dog. He was afraid. You know, Smokey was afraid of a lot of things, and what Jason did was introduce him to the world in a new way, keeping his needs in mind. And what Jason will tell you is I just channeled down that leash. I've got you. I've got you. I've got you. He would just tell Smokey with his heart and with his body, I've got you. I've got you. I've got you. And he did. He had that dog, man. And Smokey, you tell him, Bugs. Smokey not only rehabilitated, but he became a completely different dog. Jason adopted him. His family did. And then Jason got out of prison. He's now a very successful dog trainer, has his own business down in Orange County. And Canine Breakthrough is what it's called. And yeah, Smokey's no longer with us. He passed away of cancer. But that turnaround, I mean, you have, you know, and Jason, for what it's worth, was on America's Most Wanted, you know, so you got a dog that hates people, you know, you got a guy who's been typecast as being this idea, categorized as being this type of human being. He was on America's Most Wanted, et cetera, and so on. Only to have those two energies rehabilitate one another in a really incredible way. And I think one of the things that taught Jason is that he's capable of anything. Jason, when applying himself, can accomplish anything when it comes to a dog. And he's like that. He's a master trainer. He's a really, really competent. And that was not the only difficult dog we sent Jason in the 4 years he was in our program. We sent him a lot of tough dogs, or 3 years he was in our program. And I think it's also more beautiful because I had judged Jason when I first met him.
Yeah.
You know, when he first interviewed, I wasn't sure that he was the right fit. And God, was I like, I was so wrong with that characterization.
Looking ahead, how do you envision the expansion or the evolution of the Pawsitive Change Program?
Oh man, so Pawsitive Change, to me, and I think to anybody who understands the program, should be in every prison. We should be in every yard on every prison. There's no reason why we have this, you know, socioculturally, we have two really big black eyes for American culture, right? One is the prison system, the other is how we treat man's best friend. Those two cultural concepts are awful for us. Like, we should be so ashamed of the fact that we incarcerate 2.5 million, you know, Americans in the United States of America. The fact that 25% of all incarcerated men are in the United States of America, not China, not Russia. The fact that a third of all women are incarcerated in America.
Wow.
You know, a third. The fact that we spend $95 billion on just locking up Americans in a process that's been proven not to be effective is beyond me. And what we can, and the fact that we euthanize 1 million of man's best friend every year is something that we really have to address, something that we really have to come to terms with. And what Pawsitive Change offers is an opportunity for the animal sheltering system and the prison system to work together to sort of help cancel one another out. And by cancel one another out, I mean enrich what each other is trying to accomplish. The prison system is trying to reduce recidivism. Animal sheltering is trying to reduce euthanasia. And if we allow Pawsitive Change to grow and put it into every prison, the return on investment is over the top.
Love it. I love that.
So that's what we need, man. We need Pawsitive Change in every prison, and certainly in California.
Definitely. So we're coming up to the end of our time together. Is there a question that I should have asked you, or anything else that you want to share?
No, not necessarily. I mean, it's up to you, man. I wasn't, my brain really wasn't thinking about what you haven't answered or asked.
You've done great.
One of the things I would encourage people to do is, I mean, a lot of people do this. But one of the things I would encourage people to do, if you're involved in sobriety, if you're involved in, is build your dog's routine into your own healthy routine. There's something, if you're chasing down sobriety, or you're trying to, there is a, you have an opportunity with a pet, or with a series of pets, or a foster dog in particular, to be of service to something much greater than yourself, and to really understand that creature's energy, and to have a real energetic discussion. And for me, like, one of the most profound things that I've ever been able to engage in is that relationship. It's to finding more and more layers of depth to my relationship with my animals. And that involves, doing a lot of things with them, including cuddling at night, hiking, all of these things that help, better both of our lives. And I think I found a lot of spiritual freedom and a lot of spiritual insight in just doing things outside with my dog. So I would encourage folks to do that as much as possible.
Awesome. Where can people find you? How can they learn more about the Pawsitive Change Program and Marley's Mutts?
All right, we're everywhere. We're all over the socials. So you can find me at Zach Skow, ZACHSKOW. You can find Marley's Mutts at Marley's Mutts, at Pawsitive Change Program, PAWSITIVE. Facebook, Instagram, all the places. And yeah, please reach out to me if what we really need in order to keep our programs going is support. We need media support. We need, television, radio, print support to help people understand what we're trying to accomplish and all the successes we've had. We need monetary support. We have 100 and some odd dogs at all times. We're the size of a large shelter, but we operate on far less of a budget, and we have a bunch of dynamic programs. So please support us if you can. marleysmutts.org is our website. Come here, buddies. We got a whole bunch of little turds like Molokai here that need to be adopted, that need your help. Molokai has what's called strangler syndrome. That's why his face looks kind of funny, but he's healing and he's doing great. So yeah, we desperately need the support, and it's a really wonderful genre of giving back to get involved in. Animal welfare and rescue is a fucking great way to plug in your energy. It really is, because there's so many ways you can be of service. So please reach out to us, shoot me a message, and let's get to work.
Awesome. Zach, thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate you. I got a lot out of it. I enjoyed it. And
yeah, thanks for hanging in there, bud.
Absolutely. Okay, that does it for my time with Zach Skow. Thank you for watching, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode of I Love Being Sober.
Thanks, brother.
If you got value from this video, if you heard what you needed to hear, be sure to like it. Comment if you've got a question or you have something to say. Subscribe to the channel. Camelback Recovery provides treatment services for people struggling with mental health, mental illness, addiction, alcoholism, whatever it may be. So if you or a loved one is struggling and you need some guidance and you need some direction, reach out to us. Our contact information is down below, or you can go to our website, camelbackrecovery.com, whether it be detox, inpatient treatment, outpatient treatment, sober living, recovery coaching, sober companion services, whatever it may be. Like I said, we can either help you or make sure that you get sent in the right direction. We help people all over the country, all over the world for that matter. I'll see you on the next video.